1, 2, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, rock. 5, 6, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, rock. 9, 10, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, rock. We're gonna rock around the clock tonight.
George Lucas's American Graffiti is a film that is very much on the verge in terms of context and story of two iconic movements in history, those being the short-lived Hollywood Renaissance of the 1970s.
Men who learned their trade at film school or by working on low-budget quickies, later on to be known as the movie brats. Among them were Coppola and Scorsese, George Lucas, Brian De Palma and John Milius.
And the boom in counterculture that dominated the 1960s. Through the choices the character of Steve makes, through the way his character arc is presented, the core themes of the movie become evident. The underlying inequalities in American society.
What is that whipcord resilience that lets the weaker sex play half the night, then bob up clear-eyed, ready for the next morning's work?
How can such a pretty wife make such bad coffee?
I heard that.
During Steve's inciting incident, the choices he makes presents the idea of toxic masculinity in young males. In his book Story, Robert McKee described how the inciting incident must make the protagonist immediately aware that his life is out of place, and out of this need to restore balance, next conceives of an object of desire, something physical or attitudinal that he feels he lacks. At a school dance, after Steve suggests he be allowed to sleep around while still technically being with her, this happens.
Hey, Cassine! Go ahead, slug me, scar my face. I wouldn't dance with you for the last time after this gym. This is getting good.
In making him notice that other people do in fact have feelings, presented is the catalyst that calls for Steve's change in attitude. When confronted with a woman who won't simply submit to him, Steve chooses to act in an aggressive, borderline abusive manner.
I want to dance now, not at Christmas. Come on. Get your cooties off me.
Thereby extruding forms of toxic masculinity. Through being trapped amidst his toxic behavior and this desire to fix his relationship, the main conflict of tearing down the traditional American values is set up.
By the time I got to Star Wars, I said, I'm out of here. I mean, I was still in San Francisco, so I never got bugged by the LA industry. But then I just said, I'm going to do the worst thing you can do, which is to finance my own movies, but then nobody can touch me. And so I did that. But for the guys that stayed behind, it became almost intolerable that the studios change everything all the time. And unfortunately, they don't have any imagination, and they don't have any talent. So what are you selling?
The film reflecting back to the public these pragmatic aspects of the traditional 1950s values could parallel Lucas's own anti-establishment attitudes in relation to Hollywood studios and filmmaking. In the broader context, this may also parallel what we now refer to as the Hollywood Renaissance. What Spielberg, Lucas, and the other movie brats did to Hollywood in moving beyond the classical style of the then defunct studio system was often understood in terms of content and its departures to be a response to social upheavals in America. American Graffiti uses the setting of the early 1960s, the tipping point for counterculture in American youth, along with the characters being on the verge of starting their own journey in life, to all culminate and present how it's in the current generation to make the underlying issues known and to push towards the necessary change. Through Steve achieving his object of desire, American Graffiti elevates this trend of social upheaval and then presents its true intentions. McKee described the climax of a screenplay as something that confronts the protagonist who, when face to face with the most powerful and focused forces of antagonism in his life, must make a decision to take one action or another in the last effort to achieve his object of desire. This is represented during the midpoint of the film, during the scene where Steve is dumped by Laurie.
Well, you want to? Go ahead.
Not like that.
If you're not going to remember me for anything else, why don't you just go ahead?
Oh, come on, you want it and you know it.
You're disgusting! Get out of my car! Get out!
Laurie!
I told you never to mention that!
When at a diner contemplating the events that transpired, Steve is, once again, forced to make a choice. A beautiful waitress offers him to go home with her so they can talk.
Hey, listen, I'm gonna get off in an hour, and I thought you'd maybe like to come over.
After being coerced into it, he pauses. He looks to the ground and stops his waitress. In a moment that defines him forever, he simply tells her, no.
I just don't think it'd work out.
Laurie and him eventually decide to stay together. Through this choice, through Steve completing his arc and achieving his object of desire, the film suggests that the point of life isn't to blindly conform to society's expectations because it's what you've been taught. You have the power to be different. Typically, the way new Hollywood films would subvert the style of classical Hollywood would be through methods such as disregarding continuity editing, but American Graffiti's subversion comes through the film's structure, in that, as opposed to the typical 3-act structure, it's simply a series of vignettes. It draws attention to itself through its difference to classical Hollywood, and its difference to other films from that movement.
A vignette is a very short piece of writing. The writing captures a moment in its vivid freshness. Vignettes include many details that paint a picture and create a feeling.
The film, through its atypical nature, straying from the norms of Hollywood and progressing a form of film, in essence, mirrors the change that needed to happen during the 1960s. When you simply look at the title American Graffiti, it's sparked with the imagery of rebellion, with graffiti literally meaning to create within a public space without permission. The aim of this film is declared before one frame is even begun. It's Lucas defacing an entire nation with something, a message that desperately needs to be shared. In his interview with James Cameron when discussing his influences for Star Wars, Lucas describes this extremely anti-authoritarian viewpoint, paralleling the Empire to the United States, the British Empire, and to all these kingdoms that fell or will fall to the little man because of their arrogance. And in this is the point of all of Lucas's films. It's the point of American Graffiti. It's about the ones without power, whether that be Luke Skywalker, or young people, or oppressed civilians. It's in them, the little man, to make the change, because change is never inevitable when there's imbalance.
You did something very interesting with Star Wars. So it was a very anti-authoritarian, very kind of 60s.
We're fighting the largest empire in the world.
America is so proud of being the most powerful military force on the planet. It's become the empire.
We never got it. We never said, well, wait, this isn't the right thing to do.